Good evening, everyone. So, I'm Prashant, and I'm part of a community called Hackerspace Mangaluru, which basically hosts talks on technology and workshops with an intention to build a tech ecosystem in Mangalore. And as part of this, we have had an opportunity to bring Malamud here today in Mangalore. So I'll be introducing Carl with a few of what I know about him. And this literally you can spend weeks or months just learning about his work. So I'll touch up on a few of things. So Carl was self-taught in computer science. He started out as working as a consultant, a computer science consultant with expertise in databases. This was in the 80s. In late 80s, he started professionally writing books on computer science and internet. Some of his books were in '89, he wrote a book called Ingress DB, where he did this in Srinagar, in India. In '96, he wrote a book on a World's Fair for the Global Village, where the foreword for the book was written by Dalai Lama, and he had an opportunity to meet him. For those of you who are from the engineering background and computer science, he actually wrote the first README file for Postgres. So he was the first person to write the first README file for Postgres. So far he's written 9 books. All of them are on CC0 license, which is basically Creative Commons. So all his books are free. In the late 90s, 1998, he founded a company called Invisible Words in the Silicon Valley. Unfortunately, during the 2000 bubble, he had to shut it down, and he went on to become the CEO for Center for American Progress, which basically debated on topics such as net neutrality in the US and brought out policies. He also worked as a consultant to the Internet Architecture Board, which brought the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, to what it is now, today. In 2007, he founded public.resource.org. This is where his majority of the work continues to add on. He, as part of public.resource.org, Carl puts on the internet, on his website, information that the public has the right to know and has the right to access. As part of this, he has also started a lot of work in India. He, in fact, spends a lot of time in India these days. I think this is his 3rd visit to India this year, Carl? 5th visit. In the last visit, Carl, in fact, was around the Kochi area, and he is very active on Twitter. And that's where I caught him, and I asked him, hey, would you like to come to Mangaluru and talk to us about the work you're doing in India? And of course, Carl said absolutely yes. And I also promised him some Mangalore delicacies. Carl is also a creator of the durian cheesecake. So if you know durian as a fruit which is popular in the Thailand, right? So he's a creator of the durian cheesecake. So just to touch up a little bit on his work in India, Carl has filed a PIL in Delhi High Court with the Union of India Ministry of Consumer Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Standards to make these standards freely available to the public. So Carl, welcome to Mangaluru, and stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. People from Unicorn who helped put this together at Hackerspace Mangaluru. I'd like to thank Canara High School for hosting us. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give you a little bit of a quick background about where I'm coming from, the work I do in the US. And then I'm going to spend most of my talk focusing on the work in India. As Prasad said, I am self-taught in computer science. I was actually studying economics at Indiana University. And I was studying the convergence of communications and computers, what we thought might be this big global network of networks. This is in 1980, and I wasn't sure I quite believed this was true, but that's what I was doing my doctoral work on, and I thought I should get some hands-on experience. And so I went to work for the computing center, and I learned a rule. And the rule is if you read the manual, you can understand how computers work. And it's amazing how many people don't read the manuals. And so that quickly made me an expert on what these new mini computers and relational databases were. And I did that for a decade. I wrote books, I gave lectures, I was a consultant to places like the Board of Governors, our central bank. But you know, by about 1989, 1990, it was very clear that this internet thing was going to really work. It was going to be the one network that was going to take over the entire world. And we began to believe that this network might in fact reach billions of people. That sounded like hyperbole in the early 1980s, that this one network might actually have everybody in the world on it. And we're not there yet. About half the world is on the internet, and there's a long way to go. But it's very clear with billions of people connected together that there is great potential. And that potential has to be more than WhatsApp and fake news, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So when I was working, teaching and writing books, I decided I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to do something. And I was going to the Internet Engineering Task Force. This was a group of, at first just a few hundred people that got together 3 times a year, and they developed network protocols. Protocols for the domain name system, for electronic mail, for file transfer. A guy named Tim Berners-Lee had this idea of hyperlinks that he had heard from somebody else. Because there's really no new ideas on the internet. All we're doing is taking things that people had previously thought of and trying to understand how to make them better, how to make them actually work. One of the things I noticed in these Internet Engineering Task Force meetings, we had people from all over the world that were attending. And it was difficult to fly in from Australia. And so some very clever people had figured out how to transmit audio over the internet. Now, the internet was very slow in those days. Modems were very slow. The entire backbone for the internet was 1.5 million bits per second. Your home internet connection is probably faster than that. The backbone is starting to get up to 45 million bits per second. But that was it. That was the entire capacity of the net. But these guys had figured out how to do audio. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, I want to do a radio program on the internet. And I came up with the idea of doing a program called Geek of the Week. And the idea is every week I would like to do a program. It's what you know of today as podcasting. We didn't call it then. The term podcasting was actually invented 7, 8, 9 years later. And this was something that I didn't think was an invention. I thought it was a hack, right? Let's just get sound files and put them on the internet and people will download them and listen to them. Somebody came along 4 years later and took out a patent on podcasting. But when we were working on the Internet Engineering Task Force, we didn't take out patents because the whole point of this was sharing knowledge. It wasn't trying to capture knowledge and turn it into some revenue source. And so none of the Internet Engineering Task Force protocols are patent encumbered. They're open, they're free, anybody can use them. It's why this protocol worked. There was actually a very fancy protocol called Open Systems Interconnection that IBM, the DEC, and the Department of Defense, and the International Standards Organization all thought was going to be the network of the future. But the standards were very, very expensive. And they were patent encumbered. And it was a difficult network. It was complicated. Whereas on the Internet Engineering Task Force, everything we did, we tried to make it simple. So I started this radio station, and to my great surprise, it made the front page of the New York Times, which was like a dramatic thing for us, right? Because it was like, oh my gosh, we weren't used to talking to the mainstream world. This was a very geeky, nerdy thing. But the New York Times decided that this was a way of unveiling this internet thing to the world. Headline was "Move Over Ted Turner." My phone started ringing off the hook. I got a studio in the National Press Building in Washington, D.C. I joined the public radio satellite system. I made it a public radio station, not a commercial radio station. It was a non-profit organization. I got rights to a whole bunch of programs that were on public radio. I convinced the National Press Club to allow me to broadcast their speeches live. And so His Holiness the Dalai Lama showed up at the press club, we put him on the internet. Al Gore gave a speech, we put him live on the internet. So we were starting to do live streaming at the time. I remember a reporter sitting in my studio when Al Gore was streaming out live. He was from the Associated Press. He goes, "Carl, do you know how many people are listening right now?" I said, yeah. And I looked and I said, "There's 6. And he was so disappointed. He was 6. And I said, "But they're on 4 continents. Look, this guy's in Australia, this guy's in Asia, this guy's in Africa." And he was a little more impressed. When I was running that radio station, we got a high-speed link into our facility. I actually convinced one of the internet service providers to lay fiber optics down 14th Street up 10 floors. We had the fastest link in Washington, D.C., and a guy named Bill Clinton had just been elected President of the United States. And his staff was very tech-savvy, and they wanted the internet in the White House. But they couldn't convince the Department of Defense to clear their routers, right? They all had to look at them and understand, are these okay? And can we put these in the White House? And Bill Clinton was not a patient man, and he wanted to give an internet demo to prove to everybody, he was with it. And so I got a call from a guy that worked in the White House. He goes, "Carl, can we see the White House from your office?" I said, "Well, I can't see from my office. I'm on the 10th floor, looking inside at a little terrace. You want me to go to the roof?" He goes, "Yes, please. Can you do it right away?" And so I went to the roof. Now, this is a national security zone, so the door to the roof is locked. You need special permission. You get on the roof, and you see these crow's nests, and in each one there's a Secret Service agent with binoculars and another one with a rifle. And I looked, and I said, "Yeah, I can see the White House lawn." So I went back and I called the guy. And he said, "Listen, I'm going to send a guy from Motorola over." And so what we did is we went back on the roof. I threw an Ethernet cable down, the side of the roof into the National Press Club. We did an infrared link to the White House lawn. And I was told that if we were not off that roof 30 minutes before the president got on the lawn, they would shoot. And I looked up, and those guys had their binoculars looking at me, and the other guy had the rifle, and there were several of these crow's nests. We got it up and running. President Clinton came out and gave his demonstration of the internet, and so I held the speed record for White House for several years, because when they finally did get internet, it wasn't nearly as fast as the link we had given them. So it was fun being in Washington doing that kind of stuff. But when we were doing radio, we were asked to do a demonstration before the Congress. It was me, a guy named Eric Schmidt was at Sun Microsystems, and he had some of his tech guys come in, and we did a big whiz-bang demo for the communications on the Committee on Telecommunications and Finance. Showed them radio, showed them video. We actually put a satellite dish up on the roof of the House office building, which took some convincing to convince the guards to let us do that. And at the end, I was called into the back to meet the chief of staff, because this committee also did telecommunications and finance. And he said, "Listen, I have a letter here from Ralph Nader and his people, and they want to know why the Securities and Exchange Commission database, called EDGAR, is not online for free on the internet. Now, the way the Securities and Exchange Commission works, if you're a publicly traded corporation like IBM or Google or whoever, every quarter you have to submit a public report. Every year you have to do an annual report. Before you do an initial public offering, you have to submit a report. So these reports are what makes our markets transparent and efficient. It's what makes our economy work. It's a big deal. But at the time, those reports were being sold for $20 or $30 each, because the Securities and Exchange Commission had this theory that there were only a few Wall Street fat cats that cared about this kind of information, and they had plenty of money. And besides, people were dumb, and so they had the reports that were filed by these big companies, and they did a contract with a company called Mead Data Central. So the SEC paid $30 million to this company. This company in turn added value to the reports. I'm not sure what that meant still. And then they sold it to companies like Dow Jones and Disclosure, and they in turn added more value, and they put it on the retail market. And so if you were a journalist and wanted to analyze the annual reports of IBM for 20 years, you have to go to your editor and say, hey, I need $2,000, and your editor would say, go find another story. And so they asked me to look into this, because I was a database guy. I was a database expert. And I looked at it, and I went and talked to the National Science Foundation, and was able to put a deal together. So the National Science Foundation gave me some money. Now keep track of this. The U.S. government gave me money to buy data from the U.S. government to give away to the American people. We put it online. It was a big deal. There were congressional investigations about why the government was competing with the private sector. You know, why were we giving this data away when it could be sold? And I learned something, which is, you know, when you announce something like this, you want to run as fast as you can, the minute you get the go-ahead. And so we had that database up and running in about 2 months. And that forestalled any congressional investigations, because by then it was actually happening. And we had millions of people using this thing. We had senior citizen investment clubs, we had journalists, we had students looking for jobs. And at the end of about 2 years running this database, I put a sign on the World Wide Web, which I then started to believe was actually going to work. When we first started this, I was skeptical about the whole World Wide Web thing. I didn't think it would scale. I didn't think it was something that could become big. You know, so much for my expertise. So I put a sign on our webpage that said, this service will terminate in 60 days. Click here to read our source code. Click here to read our usage statistics. Click here to read the financial analysis of how much this costs to actually run, which wasn't that much. Click here to send mail to Al Gore at an email address. Click here to send mail to the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He had email. Click here to send mail to the Chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, who did not have email, so I set up an account for him. We got 17,000 messages to the chairman of the SEC. We printed them out. We brought them down there. The chairman called the Wall Street Journal that evening and said, we're going to make this database available. This is not about selling $20 documents. This is about making our markets efficient and transparent. Next morning, got a call from the chief of staff. So I think you saw the chairman call the Wall Street Journal, but there's a problem. I said, well, what's the problem? The problem is we can't do anything in 60 days. Could you please extend your deadline? We need a lot more time. And I said, no, we're not going to extend the deadline, but let's work something out. And what we worked out is I loaned them our computers. We gave them all our source code. We went down and fixed their internet line, and they were up and running within 60 days. Now, the information technology staff of the SEC hated what we were doing. They were telling reporters that we had been introducing viruses in the annual reports. And I don't know how you introduce a virus in a text document, but they were adamantly opposed to what we had been doing. All of a sudden, though, they found themselves running the busiest website that the entire federal government had. They went to their bosses and said, well, we only have this computer temporarily for Carl. We need to buy one. And the boss was like, money is no object. And so they said, oh, well, we want one of these 16 processor, fancy sun stations. So they got all these great toys. They were able to go to conferences and say they were running the busiest website. And they became real happy. They owned it. They loved it. And I did a few things like that in the 90s, and then as Prasanna said, I had a crash and burn moment in 1998 with a dot-com startup. By the way, not all dot-coms failed in 1998. There was another company that started in 98, and that was Google. And Larry Page from Google and myself actually both pitched the same investor, a guy named Andy Bechtolstein. And Andy decided to put his money into Google, and good choice, good choice. So some companies actually made it. But after that, I decided I would spend the rest of my life working with nonprofit organizations. Because, dot-com CEOs are a dime a dozen in the Valley. Running a nonprofit is a different thing to do. And in 2007, after I left the Center for American Progress, which was this huge think tank that John Podesta had started. I went in, I fixed his computers, I did some public policy stuff. But, a lot of our people that were there ended up working for the Obama White House, including the chief of staff and many other senior officials. So I was a little guy in that operation. But after I left John, I started public resource. And I decided I was going to tackle the law, which had seemed too hard in the 90s. In the 90s, I put the patent database online, I put the SEC online, but the law seemed too hard. Big vendors, big money, we have over 3,000 courts in the United States, actually 3,000 counties. I think there's probably 6,000 different courts. But I was able to get the U.S. Court of Appeals back file online. I worked with a guy named Larry Lessig from Harvard. We actually went to one of the vendors and said, look, we're going to do this one way or another. How about you just take our money? And the vendor, Fastcase, their CEO is actually on my board of directors now, said sure. And so we actually raised $600,000. We bought the entire U.S. Court of Appeals files and put them on the net. And that was a big deal. A big deal. First time law like that was available for ordinary citizens to use without paying money to the big vendors. But the kind of law that I found to be the most important, the hardest, were public safety codes. Things like building codes. Building codes specify the structural stability of a building like this. They specify fire exits so that if there is a fire, you can get out. And these laws are passed because of tragedies we've had in the past, of factories collapsing, of buildings collapsing, of horrific fires. And so we have laws that ensure the public safety. And in the U.S., I started posting all the building codes and electrical codes and fire codes because they are the law. And my position was that in the United States, the law has no copyright because it is owned by the people. And there's a whole bunch of Supreme Court opinions about that. But despite that, there was a fiction. And the fiction was nonprofit organizations, standards development organizations like the National Fire Protection Association, develop model codes like the National Electrical Code. And those codes are then enacted into law. The National Electrical Code is enacted in all 50 states and by the federal government. And the fiction is that these are still private works. And so the California Building Code costs $1,000. And there's a copyright assertion. And if you make a copy of it, you're violating copyright according to these standards bodies. And I disagreed with that. And so I started buying all these codes and posting them, and we got sued. And we are still in court. We got sued by 6 plaintiffs with 4 law firms. We were actually convicted at the district court level, and it went to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Court of Appeals said, no, wait a minute. Surely there's a constitutional right to speak the law. Surely this must be fair use. And so we're back in front of the district court. Protracted litigation. In the United States, litigation is very, very expensive. My lawyers work for free. They work pro bono because they believe in democracy and they believe this is an important cause. But I asked them to give me a bill at the end of each year, a pro forma invoice. My pro forma legal bill in 2015 was $2.8 million. You cannot fight these fights alone, and without these dedicated lawyers, I would not have been able to do it. So I want to turn to India now. So I was doing building codes and electrical codes, and I went to see my friend Anish Chopra, who was Chief Technology Officer of the United States. And he said, Carl, what are you up to? And I explained what I was doing with the codes. He kind of smiled. And I said, well, I'm doing this all over the world. I had put the Australian building code online, and we got a takedown from them. And I had been doing stuff in Europe. We were sued in Europe because I posted the EU mandated public safety standard for baby pacifiers. You know, the thing that babies suck? And there's a safety standard for that says that the rim of the baby pacifier must be big enough that the baby doesn't swallow it. If there's pellets that shake, they should be on the outside, not on the inside, because if it's on the inside, the baby chews through it and swallows the pellets. And I got sued in Germany for that, and we lost. There is a $250,000 injunction out against me. If I were to post that baby pacifier standard again, I would have to pay 250,000 euros. And if I don't pay it, they sue me as well as my NGO. As they put it, the person of the president shall be seized for administrative detention for a period of 1 to 2 years. So I explained all this to Anish, and I said, well, you know, I'm thinking of doing India. And he kind of smiled. He goes, well, you need to go meet my friend Sam Petroda, who was in the cabinet at the time. He goes, Sam's my counterpart. And then he stops and goes, well, not exactly. So when Manmohan Singh and Obama had their big summit, the table, one end of the table was Dr. Singh, on the other end of the table was Barack Obama. Anish Chopra was way in the back, sitting with the staff aides. Sam Petroda was sitting right next to President Obama. As you may know, Sam led the telecommunications revolution that brought a telephone in every village in India. He was a senior minister under Rajiv Gandhi. He was in the cabinet under Manmohan Singh. And I said, Petroda ji, may I come see you? And I did, and I showed him some Indian standards. Now, Indian standards are developed by the Bureau of Indian Standards, which is a government agency. And I showed him those. I said, look, the National Building Code of India costs 14,000 rupees. Personal protective equipment for the safety in laboratories or for firefighters, you know, goggles that they wear, the safety of textile machines, the safety of pesticides used in agriculture, the safety of toys, the safe transportation of hazardous materials on the roads and railways of India. And the Bureau of Indian Standards sell these, and they assert copyright, and you're not able to make a copy without their permission, according to their point of view. So I explained this to Sam, and he said, you know, this should be available to people. And I said, well, I'm thinking of posting them on the internet. He goes, well, you should do it. This is good. And I said, well, Sam, the Bureau of Indian Standards is going to be very annoying. I don't care. And so I said, okay, fine, I'm going to do this. And so I bought all 19,000 Indian standards. 1,000 of them we transformed. We retyped them into HTML so they work on your cell phone. We redrew the diagrams so you can paste them in your document. We made them accessible to the visually impaired. We made them better. And I ran it for about a year and a half. And then it came time to renew my subscription with the Bureau. And I did what you're supposed to do, which is I sent them a letter and told them what I was doing. I said, first of all, I would love to renew. Here's my purchase order. And by the way, here's all your standards. They're on the internet. Isn't this great? They are wildly popular with the engineering students of India. They love them. And would you like the HTML? I'd love to help you. But they were not leaks. They sent me a very nasty letter, copyright infringement, we're cutting you off, no more standards for you. We petitioned the Ministry of Food and Consumer Affairs. I had affidavits from a number of very distinguished professors of engineering in India. Vince Cerf, the father of the internet, did an affidavit. Sam Petroda was out of government by then, he did an affidavit. We had examples of how we made them better, before and after shots. We had long lists, so there's 150 standards that are subject to mandatory certification in India. You cannot sell steel unless it is stamped by the Bureau of Secretaries, Deputy Secretaries, and others. They supervise 650 committees, which has volunteers. Professors, engineers, all volunteer their time because they want to make India safer. They come up with a draft standard. It is issued for public comment. It is then issued as an Indian standard, and it is noticed in the official gazette. It is then used in law. And so our position is that these are the law. The ministry turned us down, and so we have instituted public interest litigation in front of the Honorable High Court of Delhi and New Delhi. I have two co-petitioners, Mr. Srinivas Kodali who is a transportation engineer, but you may know him from a lot of the work he's done on exposing security flaws in Aadhaar. He's been one of the leaders in that. And my other co-petitioner is Sushant Simha, who does the amazing Indian Canoe website, which has all the court cases for India available for free, as well as the Constitution and many, many other things. We're represented by two pro bono lawyers. The firm of Nasheed Desai is a very large Mumbai firm, and Mr. Salman Khurshid, former Minister of Law and Justice, former Minister of External Affairs, is our senior advocate. We had an oral argument before the High Court on October the 9th. We are going back for what we hope is our final oral argument on December the 7th. So we're hopeful. We think we have a strong case. You never know. But we believe we've presented our point of view in a good way. So that is one collection in India. And as you can see, it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing with the government, even though what we're doing, I believe, falls squarely within the framework of the law. The Bureau of Indian Standards disagrees with us. A second collection that I maintain in India is called Hind Swaraj. So I was seeing Sam one day, and he looks at me and says, "You have a stick." I said, "A stick?" USB drive. And so I give him a USB drive, and we talk, and then he hands it back to me, and I said, "So what's this, Sam?" The collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, all 100 volumes, 1,000 pages each. New electronic version is now available in beta. So where'd you get it, Sam? Sabarmati Ashram gave it to me. I said, "Oh, really? What are they doing?" "Well, they're going to put it on a website." I said, "Well, can I put it on a website?" He goes, "Yeah, no, absolutely." And I was like, "Well, would the Sabarmati Ashram be annoying?" He goes, "No, works of Gandhi, this is good." And I've actually come to know the folks at the Sabarmati Ashram well. Ms. Dina Patel actually does the electronic version of the collected works and does an amazing, amazing job. But since I had the collected works, I decided I should do some more stuff. And I had been reading intensively on the works of Gandhi, and I started looking around government websites. So I found 129 audio files that were from All India Radio of Gandhiji speaking in 1947 and 48. And so I put those on the Internet Archive, added those to the collection. Took out of the collected works the English translation of each of those speeches and set them in HTML. So you can listen to the speech, you can read it in English, and then all the footnotes are hot. And what that means is you can click right back into the collected works, and you can read the letters he wrote that day and the letters he wrote the next day, and then you can go on to the next speech. You can actually walk through the last year of his life. 129 speeches. Every 2 or 3 days he gives a talk. I found the works of Ambedkar on the Maharashtra state server, but it wasn't all of them, and so I downloaded those. And then I went and bought the remaining volumes. So we have the most complete collection of the works of Dr. Ambedkar. Same thing with the selected works of Nehru. Nehru Memorial Trust had about 60 of the volumes of the second series, and there had been another 10 volumes that had come out, so I bought those, scanned them, and put them online. But then I discovered with the government bookstores in Delhi, the publications division of the Ministry of Information is actually the largest publisher in India, or one of them. And I went to their bookstore, and they had like 50 volumes of biographies of the builders of modern India. There's 10 volumes on the presidential palace, beautiful coffee table books. The 3 volumes on the temples of Odisha. There's books on the folk tales of Kashmir. There's a comic book about the life of Tagore, how to wear a sari, the lamps of India. And every time I go to Delhi, I buy a lot of books. So I was in Delhi a couple of weeks ago. I bought 86 kilograms of books. I buy them from the Archaeological Survey. I went to the Indian Council for Agricultural Research and bought 50 books on the mango, the onion, how to make honey. Just amazingly good books. And I take those books and I ship them back to the U.S. and we scan them and we put them online and they're available for free access. The government of India actually asserts copyright over these things. There is a notice in the beginning, copyright, all rights reserved. So here is my feeling. This is government money. These things are meant for public distribution. My use is non-commercial. I believe this use is justified. It serves the mission. But it is possible that a government agency will come to me and object for having done this. I had similar objections in the US when I posted some government works. And you know, you have to have a good story. Copyright is not binary, right? Even if something is in copyright, you can always excerpt like a paragraph. If you're blind, you have the right to listen to anything, whether or not it's in copyright. That's American treaty. Under Indian copyright law, there is a teaching exemption. If a professor assigns material to a student in the course of their instruction, copyright does not apply. And a lot of people think copyright is a binary thing. You either have it or you don't. But copyright is a matter of degrees. And you have to exercise judgment. And I did that with these. And again, I may have to bear the consequences. So that's collection number 2, it's in Swaraj. Collection number 3. I was in India, and I was sick. I was waiting for my 17-hour plane ride home to San Francisco. And I was with my friend Sam, and he was on the phone, and you know, bank CEOs were coming to see him, and I was in bad shape. And I just pulled out my laptop and I started looking around, and I discovered something called the Digital Library of India that the government had. They had been scanning books for 10 years, and it was 5